What's up guys, how are you doing? I'm really happy to announce that in this video, finally we're going to learn JWT authentication using Golang. We'll be using the JWT Go package to create the entire authentication logic. We'll be using Gin and Gonic to create the APIs. So we'll have APIs for sign up, for login, for getting the list of all the users and getting a user by ID. We'll be storing these users in our MongoDB database. All right, so we're going to cover a lot of things: Gin and Gonic, MongoDB, Golang, JWT authentication, and I'll also show you how to create these awesome logs in your terminal. As you can see, these logs are being generated. I have the program running in the background. So if I try signing up, by the way, I left out one thing. We also have validation in this video. So I'm going to also show you how to validate the response, the request coming from a postman. All right. So if I use the same email and phone number to sign up the user, it says this email or phone number already exists. So if I change the email address, it still says this email or phone number already exists. That means I have to change my phone number as well. So I'll change my phone number. Let's see what happens. So now it has inserted the user for me in the database. All right. And now I can use the same email address and the same password in my login API. So let me also copy the password. And if I log in, it basically gives me the token. So if I copy this token, and I can now use this token in my /users API. So I can come here, paste the token, and then I can send, and I'll get the count of all the users in my database, and I'll get all the user objects that exist in my database. Now I can do one more thing. I can copy any ID from the users, and I can go to get user by ID API, and I can just paste the ID here, and we can get that particular user as well. So sign up, login, get all users, and get user by ID. So we have a lot to learn, a lot to cover. I might have to break down the video into 3 or 4 different videos because of the length of this video. So and also I have to go to office as well. So obviously I have to break it down because I don't get a long time to shoot in just one day. So we'll get started right now, and let's see how far we can go before I have my next business call. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start from the terminal. I'm in a place in my laptop where I usually keep my Golang code. So here I'm going to create a new directory called Golang JWT project. I'm going to cd into it, and I'm going to go mod it. So I'll say go mod init github.com/akhil/Golang JWT project. All right. So this has created a go.mod file for me. If you're from a JavaScript background, this basically means npm init is exactly the same thing. The go.mod file will keep a list of all the dependencies of this project. I'm going to now start writing the code in a code editor, which is Visual Code in my case. You could be using any other code editor as well. And here we'll start now creating different folders. All right. So we'll follow proper project structure. So we'll have controllers, we'll have database, we'll have helpers, models, and routes. We'll also have our main.go file, which is at the base of this project. And we can start from the models actually. So let's start from the models. Inside models, you will have a file called usermodel.go. Okay, and here we'll call this package models. We're creating this as a package so that we can easily import it in our main.go file. We'll have an import statement, and we'll have a struct. Struct helps us to define our own user type, or our own data type, sorry, The data type that we define here using struct can have multiple different things. So it can have strings, it can have other primitive data types as well, like time and all of those different things. All right. So we want to create our own struct, which is user here, and this struct, which is called as the model, it basically acts as like the middle layer between your Golang program and your MongoDB or any other database. So the database understands JSON, and Golang does not understand JSON, it understands string or those type of data types, right? So you need a layer that basically converts things from JSON to Golang to JSON. All right, so that's how you have this kind of a struct here. The struct will have ID, first name, will have last name, you will have password, email. So we are basically saying that for every user you'll have to define at least these different things. So we'll have phone, we'll have a token for each user, we'll have a user type, we'll have a refresh token. We can skip some of these things. I mean, when you're implementing along with me, feel free to skip a couple of things, but I have followed the industry standard kind of a practice where you accept first name, last name, and their email, phone number both, and then you have the token and refresh token. You can skip a couple of things if you want to. I'm also going to keep created at and updated at timestamps, which is again an industry standard, industry practice. You can feel free to skip it. Then you have your user ID. All right, and here we'll have primitive dot object ID. And where does this primitive come from? We'll basically be installing the go.mongodb.org/mongodriver/bson/primitive package. The reason for that is we want to use bson here, _ID, and first name is string, whereas for JSON we can define it like this. So it's first name inside double inverted commas, and validate required minimum is equal to 2, max is equal to 100. All right, so you're telling Golang that, hey, in JSON, when you're talking to the JSON database, this is what it's going to look like when it's stored in the database. But when you get it from the user, from let's say Postman, or when you're working with this data type, it's going to be called first name with capital F. But when stored in the database, it's going to be called first name with a small f. And you also have validations that first name is required, and minimum it has to be at least 2 characters, and it has to be maximum at 100 characters. And then you have the last name, which is again string, password, which is again string, and email, again it's a string, phone number, again string. By mistake I've kept capital S here. That shouldn't be the case, it should be small s. Token is again a string. User type, string, and refresh token is again string. So created at is a timestamp, so it's going to be time. Now we'll have to use the time package that Golang provides us. This again is going to be timestamp, and user ID is going to be string. All right, now let's start working on the JSON side of things. In JSON, this is going to look like this: last name. Let's validate it. Let's say required. You can choose to not keep it required if you want to, but I've kept it required field. Then you have comma, minimum is equal to 2, comma, maximum is equal to 100, and close the commas. Here again you'll say JSON password validate. Password obviously is required, minimum 6 characters. And here you can have so many more validations, right? That you need these many special characters and capital words and all of those things and numbers. So you can keep all those validations. I'm not doing that because this line will keep continuing if you want to actually put all the validations required. So the validations I'm keeping quite simple and straightforward. For email, we'll have validation. So this is a validation type, in the sense it will make sure that it has an @ right, and all those different things. It'll make sure of that. So the email is the validation type and it's required. And here you again have JSON, you have phone number, and validate is again required. With phone number also you can have multiple validation criteria, like for example it should be maximum 10 characters, should be minimum 1 or 2 characters, right, with phone number. And you can also have that phone number cannot have special characters. So you can have those kind of validations as well. I'm just keeping it short. Here you have JSON token and JSON user type. Now this is probably new for you. So here we can validate using in JavaScript, like you have enum, right? That a value for a particular field can only be of 2 particular types or 3 particular types, right? You can show those values, you can list those values using enum. Here also in Golang you have a very similar concept. You have required and equal to admin, or it can be equal to user. So this is the same concept as enum. All right. And here we have JSON refresh token and JSON created at JSON updated at JSON user ID. Perfect. So this is your model file. So the model sits at the center of the entire program, and the other most important thing obviously is our main.go file. So let's start working on that. We're obviously going to call it package main. It's going to import a couple of things, and then we're going to have func main. So for import, I know that I'll be using OS, and I'll be using Gin Gonic. So I'll say github.com/gin. Actually, before that, let me install it. So I'll say go get github.com/gin gonic/gin. So it's going to get the Gin Gonic package for me, and this is very similar to basically saying npm install, right? So we're saying npm install a particular name of the package, and here we have github.com/gin gonic/gin. Perfect. And now you'll say port is equal to os dot get environment port. So we'll have an environment file, and then we'll obviously get the environment. And if we have set something for port, then it will be imported into this variable called port. And then we'll also check here if there was nothing there. So if the port is empty, then you at least need something, right? So you'll say port is equal to 8000 if there's nothing there. And for router, we'll say gin.new. And we'll use that beautiful logger that you saw was already a part of Gin, so we'll say gin.logger. And we'll have two types of routes. We'll have auth router and user router. So let me just save this file for now, and then let me create in routes. Let's create two files. One is going to be called the auth router.go. The other is going to be called the user router.go. Sorry, it's go. Right. Now for both of them, they're going to be part of the package called routes. So here we'll say package routes, and here also we'll say package routes. Perfect. Now in our main.go file, we'll say routes.auth routes. So you must be asking, where does this routes come from? These routes are nothing but the package which is routes. So we'll say routes. And where does it come from? So we'll say Golang JWT project /routes. Right. So in our routes folder, we have two files which are of the package routes, and we're going to be accessing them using this routes variable. So we'll say routes.auth routes, and we're going to pass the router that we just created, the Gin router, into this auth routes. Similarly, we'll say routes.user routes router. So by now, I think you must have understood what Gin is helping you do, right? Gin is basically creating a router for you. Very similar to the Mux router that we've used, the Gorilla Mux router. So it's quite similar to that. But it's just much cleaner. So even Fiber package also helps you to do something similar. And here we'll create two APIs. So we'll say router.get /API 1 func c star gin.context. So in these router handler functions, when we are using Gin, you don't have to pass the W and R, this response and request, right? If you remember in my other videos, you have to pass in your func handlers, you have to pass W and R quite a couple of times. But here all you have to pass is Gin context, and you'll be able to access the response and request from here itself. So we'll say c.json. You can also set headers like this. So we're setting header to 200. So in my other videos, you must have seen that I have to actually set the headers, right, when I send response, w.set header, those kind of things. But here you don't have to do all of that. Gin takes care of all of that. So that's why people like using Gin. But if you know the other way, the raw way of building APIs without using any fancy tools like Gin and Fiber, then you'll probably might be able to create your own router library yourself. So that's why I try and stick to the very basic packages like Gorilla Mux and those ones. Or sometimes I don't use any package, right? The problem with using the pros with using a package to help simplify things is that it saves time, but there's a con as well, that you don't really get to learn the underlying basics of a language, because once you're just dependent on packages, you can't really change a lot of things. So this is what happened with a lot of people when they were using Ruby on Rails back in 2011, 2012, that they were so dependent on the framework, which is Ruby on Rails. They were not able to actually make changes below the surface, below the abstraction layer, right? So I always suggest, so I've been a Ruby on Rails developer, so I always suggest to people that, you know, don't just learn frameworks, learn the underlying concepts, because then you can build your own technologies, you can build stuff, you have a lot more control. You can actually go inside the packages like Gin and Fiverr and make changes of your own and, you know, sort everything out. You can do all of that stuff, right? Only if you know how those frameworks were built in the first place. So we'll say access granted for API 1, and then you have another API called API 2. So we'll say router.get API/2, and we again have func c star gin dot context, where C is capital, and here again you'll say c.json 200 comma gin.h, says success access granted for API 2, and all you have to say is router.run and put this colon there and say port. Port is basically 8000 in this case if in the environment port is empty, otherwise it'll be whatever we define in the environment variable file. All right, so we've created our main.go file, we've created the structure of the entire project, we've created our user model, and we have quite a few things to do. In the first video we started building up our main.go file, and Ola Dejo, who is a viewer on my YouTube channel, has said that the capital RUN function won't work, and he's right. Actually, I checked the Gin documentation, and the function actually has to be only capital R, and then UN is small, and this is an actual function in the Gin library documentation. So this is one small mistake I had made in the previous video. Please check it out and correct it in your own code. But everything else is perfectly fine, perfectly all right. And now we can start building on the other things in this project. So we had created 2 files in routes, 1 file in models. Now we'll create the helpers file. So we'll say auth helper.go, and we'll say token helper.go. Then we'll also create our database connection file. So we'll say database connection.go, and in our controllers we'll say user controller.go. Now after your main.go file, usually you would want to work on your routes. That's what I recommend usually, right? So let's start working on our routes. So this is package routes, and we'll import a couple of things. And obviously we will need github.com/Gin Gonic. That's something we need to create the routes, and we'll need to import our handler, our controllers as well. So we'll do that later on, but for now let's go ahead and create our auth routes function. Let me close the other files just to remove the clutter. So the auth routes function is this function that we've already called in our main.go file. So that's the exact function that we're working on right now, and it basically accepts incoming routes. Sorry, the O is small, incoming routes, and we'll give a reference to Gin engine. So we'll have incoming routes dot post, and then again we'll say incoming routes dot post, and here I'm just going to simply define my sign up and login routes. So I'll say users/sign up. I've already shown you how to use these routes in the Postman. So it's sign up and login routes, and in our controller file we'll have functions to handle our sign up. Similarly, we'll have users/login, and in our controller we'll have login function, and we'll say controller, and here we'll say Golang JWT project / controllers. Just like we imported routes package, we have imported the controller package in this file. Let's work on our user routes. So you go to your user router.go file, and here we'll obviously import a couple of things. We'll have Gin Gonic, and we'll definitely have our controller, and we'll also need our middleware in this case. So I have to create a middleware folder if I have not already done that. Let me check. Yeah, I can't see a middleware folder, so I need a middleware folder as well. Inside the middleware folder, you'll need auth middleware.go file. So we'll say auth middleware.go. So here you'll say Golang JWT project / middleware. So the user routes function is again the same that we've already referred to here in our main.go file. And as you can see, we're just passing it our entire router here. So that's why when we say incoming routes, we are passing a reference to gin.engine. And as I've already shown you, there are two routes for users. One is the /users route to get all the users, and there's a /user/id route, which is to get a particular user by ID. So here we'll say incoming routes dot use. Now here I want to use my middleware, and the reason I'm using a middleware is to ensure that both these routes are protected routes. All right. With your authentication or auth routes, sign up and login, these are not protected routes because the user does not have a token at this point of time. But after login, the user will have a token, and that's what we want him to use in our users route. He should not be able to use the users route without logging in or without having a token. All right. And so the project that I'm showing you is like a very basic bare bones project. After login, you can just get the users, but you could have a complete library management system, or you can have your e-commerce, anything, but all of those routes that will come as part of e-commerce or library management system or anything like that will all be protected out here using the middleware. And here we'll say incoming routes dot get, and I have again incoming routes dot get. So the first one is /users, and I want to use the controller dot get users function to handle this. We don't have this function yet, but we'll be working on it. And here we'll say users and user ID, so that we can send a specific user ID and access data of that particular user. And here I'll say get user. Perfect. So our main.go file is ready, auth router file is ready, user router file is ready, and our models file is ready. Now what we can do is, since from our main.go file we have gone to routers, from routers we can go to controllers. So we can either go to controllers and we can start working on the controllers, or we can work on our database connection. So whatever you can do any of these two things. So what I'll do, I think I'll work on my database connection, and then I'll go over to my controllers. So I'll come to my database connection file. I'll close the other files for now, and here I'll say package database, and I'll import a couple of files that I'll need here. The function that I want to use is going to be called func db instance. Just make sure you get the spelling of instance right. It returns a Mongo client simply. All right, and we're going to have a .environment file. So we'll use the go.environment package for that. So for now, I'm going to say I need fmt, I need log to log out errors. I'm going to use time and OS as well. You'll see soon why. I definitely need the context package. I need the go.environment package to work with the environment variables. So I'll say joho / go.env. If you have not seen the other videos on my channel, I have more than 100 videos on Golang. You can check them out. I've covered all of these packages in detail in so many other tutorials. And then we have our MongoDB driver go.mongodb.org/mongo driver/mongo/options. So since we already have our go.environment library, let's use it. So let's say go.environment.load. We'll use the load function to load up our .environment file. If there's an error, which means if error is not equal to nil, we'll log.fatal. This log library is what you're using to log out any fatal errors. We'll say error loading the .env file. All right, and we'll create a variable called MongoDB, D capital, and we'll use the OS package to get the environment for MongoDB URL. Speaking of which, I think it's the right time to actually create our .env file. So we'll say .env, and in my .env file, I just need two things: port. I can write any port here. So here, if you see, I'm getting port as well, right? So my port variable I have to define here, and in my database connection.go file, I'm using the MongoDB URL. So here I'm going to say MongoDB URL. So usually any MongoDB URL starts with MongoDB, and in my case it's localhost 27017. I'm using it on Ubuntu, but you could be running MongoDB on Docker, or you could be having your own completely managed MongoDB instance on Robo. I think it's called Mongo Robo or something like that. Whatever you use, just get your MongoDB URL and put it here. Then this is the name of the database. Even if this database doesn't exist in your MongoDB, doesn't matter. MongoDB works in a way where if the database doesn't exist, it creates it for you. Now going back to database connection file, here we'll say mongo.new client. Sorry, this is supposed to be small, N capital, EW small, client, and here you'll have options dot client dot apply URI, and here you'll pass your MongoDB variable that you've just defined out here. Okay, and you're going to capture this in a variable called client, or you can also capture the error out here itself. If error is not equal to nil, you're going to log out the error. And now we'll use the context package. So we'll say context dot with timeout, and we'll say context dot background comma 10 multiplied by time dot second, and we'll capture that in CTX and cancel. And we'll use the defer function to call cancel at the end of this function. And then we'll just use context to connect to our client. So we'll say client.connect, and we'll pass context here. We already have context, which has a timeout value. And here again, we'll try and capture the error if there's any error, and we'll print out the error. So we'll say if error not equal to nil, log.fatal error. If everything goes well, then we'll just print out connected to MongoDB. I think DB can be made into capital. And from this function, this client is what you'll return, and that's basically the Mongo client, the reference to it, which we are returning from this function. And your DB instance function is complete. Here, we can also have variable called client, which is of type mongo.client. Which will be equal to DB instance. So this basically the Mongo client. We call this function, it returns a Mongo client, and this we've captured in this variable called client, which is of type Mongo client. Perfect. Now we're going to use a function to access a particular collection in the database. So we'll say func open collection, and collection name string. So you can pass a particular collection here, and then you can use it. So we'll say mongo.collection is what will be returned from this function. So this function basically returns a particular collection. And we define a variable called collection, which is of again type mongo.collection. So we'll say client.database. And we can define the database here. We can define the name of the collection. Sorry, this is open bracket and close bracket. And we simply return the collection here. Now this database can be the database that you get in your, let's say you created a fully managed database, right, in a MongoDB instance in the cloud, for example. So the database that you'll get will be mostly like cluster 0 or something, cluster 1 or something like that, right? You'll get your own cluster. So let's just write cluster 0 here for the time being. And this completes our database connection.go file. Now we can also start working on our controllers. So we'll head over to controllers and the user controller.go file. And here we're going to call it package controllers. And we're obviously going to import quite a few packages here. And we're going to have a few functions like hash password function. We're going to have our verify password function. We're going to have our sign up function. We're going to have a login function. Sign up spelling is wrong. And we're going to have get users and get user function. Where am I getting these functions from? These are basically these functions, right? So in your controller you have sign up function, login function, and get users and get user function, right? So we'll say func get users, func get user. So these are the functions that we need to work on. So we'll import context here, fmt log string convert net/http time, and we obviously need Gin Gonic, so we'll say Gin Gonic /gin, and I also need the validator, so I'll say github.com/go playground/validator/v10, and we'll have to get our helpers from this package. So I'll say Golang JWT project/helpers. We'll also need our database and our models. So let's say the same thing, Golang JWT project/models and Golang JWT project/helpers, and then to hash our password we'll need crypto/bcrypt. All right, so these are all the packages I need, and I also need some MongoDB packages as well, so I'll install them later on. And here let's create our user collection. Mongo/collection is equal to database.open collection. So open collection is the function that we just wrote together, and here we'll pass the database client. Name of the collection is user, and I'll create a variable called validate, and I'll use validator that I've just installed here, the package, and I'll say new. Okay, so guys, I'll have to keep this video short. I think it's over 20 minutes already, and in the next video I'll have to continue this. So we had started working on our user controller.go file. We had written out all these functions, and now we want to start working on these functions. Now the get user function is the easiest function of them all, so I'll start first working on that, and then we'll tackle sign up and login functions. All right, so the get user function, you need to remember that only the admin can have access to the user's data. Not a regular user cannot simply go ahead and start accessing the data of other users. All right, so this means that this API, the data that's coming from this API, if it's the data of another user, then a regular user cannot access it, only the admin can access it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So with that out of the way, now let's start working on this function. So Gin gives us access to handler functions. So if you don't use Gin, you know that you have to use http.handle functions, right? But Gin gives you access to its own handler functions. These brackets will be shifted here because the function is actually get user. And here we can start writing the definition of the function. So this returns a function which takes in gin.context, and first you need to get the user ID because that's the user that you want to access. So you'll say c.param user ID. So with the help of C, you can access the parameters sent from Postman using the API to the Golang function. So you can access it using user ID. And why is this user ID and not ID? It's because in your user route you have mentioned user ID. If you said only ID, then you would have written just ID here, right? So, but if you written user ID, I usually do this just to like, for example, if I had a products and orders route, I would definitely write product ID and user ID, order ID there. It just makes things clearer instead of just keeping ID everywhere, right? So this is a good practice to have. Now, you know that on my channel, there are more than 100 Golang videos, right? And for all types of videos, I try and follow a different project structure and almost different frameworks. So in this case, I'm using Gin Gonic, but mostly I use, in many cases, I use Mux, and some cases I use Fiber. So, so you know that, I've worked on multiple different project structures, multiple different frameworks. And I can tell you that this project that we're making right now has one of the best project structures out of all the projects that I've done on my channel till now. So if you want to use this further and you want to improve on it, and you want to create some other project using this project structure, I would highly recommend you do that, like having these different folders for controllers, database helpers, all of these different things, and the way I've kept these files. So for example, if you had product and orders also, you can just have product router.go and order router.go similarly out here. So why I'm saying that is because this is a very, very solid project structure. I've worked on really big production sized application, and we've scaled them to hundreds and thousands, if not millions of users. So, and these kind of project structures, they scale really, really well. Now, obviously, I'm talking about monolith only, not microservices. I will show you microservices using gRPC. So that's a complete different animal altogether. So if you're more comfortable with microservices, definitely using a microservices project structure is much better. But if you want to use a monolith, this is the right way to go. All right. And now that we have user ID in our user ID here, I'll call my helper file, and then I'll have a function called match user type to UID. I need this function because I want to check if the user is an admin or not. All right. So this takes C and this takes user ID. And I'll make this equal to error. So I'll say if error equal to. And if error not equal to nil, that means there is an error. Then you'll say c.json http.status bad request. You can send a bad request like this: gin.header error error.error. Okay. And then you'll return from this. Now, instead of going further with this function, what I'll do is I'll actually work on this match user type to UID function, because that'll then give you a little more context into what we're doing exactly. So go over to your auth helper file. In your auth helper file, you'll say package helper. You'll import a couple of things. I can tell you right now that we definitely need errors, and we need Gin Gonic. So we'll say Gin Gonic /gin. The function that we're working on right now that we want to use is called match user type to UID. So let's work on that. So you'll say func match user type to UID. You already know that it takes C, which is gin.context. It takes user ID, which is a string. You can check that again. You can see that it's taking C and user ID. And then it returns an error. So we'll say user type equal to c.get string user type. And UID equal to c.get string UID. Error to begin with is nil. Now we'll do the magic where we'll say user type. If the user type is user and not, which is basically means that it's not admin, and UID is not equal to that person's user ID. Right? Because we want the user to only access his own user data. A user cannot access the user data of any other user. But if it was admin out here, then he could have done anything. So that's why we're checking if it's user and his UID is not equal to user ID. then we'll say that obviously you cannot access it, right? So you'll say error is equal to errors.new, because we're using the errors package. We'll use errors.new unauthorized to access this resource, and we'll return the error. And here we'll also call a function called check user type. We'll pass C and user type to it. So this function is a helper function, so we'll work on it right now itself, and we'll equate it to error, and we'll return the error from here, from this function. Let's work on the check user type function. So we'll say func check user type c star gen dot context, and role, we're passing a role here which is of type string. So your user type basically is what you're passing here. We're using that as role here, which is basically admin or user, and this also returns an error. So here you'll say user type equal to c dot get string user type, error is equal to nil, and if user type is not equal to role, we'll say errors dot new unauthorized to access this resource, and we'll return the error, and at the end also we'll return the error. Right, so this function returns an error which is caught here, and then this error is returned. So everything looks great. So that's our entire logic to ensure that only admins get access, otherwise to a user's data, otherwise unauthorized to access. And if the user is only requesting his own data, then it's all right. Right? Then we don't have any issues. All right. So going back to our user controller, now we want to start working with the database. Okay. So we'll say where cdx, sorry, not in capital, where cdx comma cancel is equal to context dot with time out context dot background comma 100 multiplied by time dot second. So we've given it a timeout, and now we'll define a variable called user, which is equal to models dot user. The models you have already defined here. So we're creating a variable which is a representation of the struct, and now we can easily find this user from our database. We have to get a user from our database using the user ID. Okay, so how do we do that? We'll say user collection, which is a variable defined out here, dot find one. We pass the context, and then we say user ID equals to this user ID. Okay, then all you need to do is decode this data So you already know that MongoDB saves data as JSON, right? And Golang doesn't understand JSON. Since Golang doesn't understand JSON, that's why we created the struct in the first place. Now we can decode the JSON information into the information that Golang understands, which is strings and all of those. So that's why we use the decode function. All right. So this is the only part I think where you might get confused. This line. Otherwise, everything else is very standard Golang, right? We're just using the context package, and we're just using helpers. So that's quite straightforward. But I'm sure you might get confused here. So that's why I explained what we're doing here. And so we're just getting that user by ID. All right. And then we'll equate this to the error, and we'll use defer cancel, and then we'll just check for the error. So if error is not equal to nil, then you'll say c.json http dot. So here instead of bad request, because it's not a bad request, it's actually a server error, so I'll say status internal server error. Now this is not a big program, so I'm not having my own separate file where I define all types of errors, like bad requests and validation errors and internal server errors. I'm not doing that, but if I think in the next series I might create a bigger project, and then I'll probably show you how you can have status code, how error codes, and how you can have error handler methods in a completely separate file. All right. Now this project is not that big, so I don't want to make it more complicated. So that's why I'm handling error out here itself. So here you'll say gin.h error dot error. Okay, and you'll return from this function. From here you'll return c.json. If everything goes well, we need a status okay, and we'll pass the user. We'll pass the data of the user. Okay. So after decoding, you'll get the data in user, which is this, and you can pass the user from this function. All right. Now we need to work on our sign up function. So let's come here, and for sign up, it's the same. It's gin.handler func, and we'll return function which accepts C, which is basically gin.context. We'll say var cdx comma cancel is equal to context dot with timeout context dot background comma 100 multiplied by time dot second, and we'll create a variable that, like we did here, called user. It's of type models dot user. Now sign up function creates a user in the database. That's why you need to do this. Okay. So we'll use the c dot bind JSON function. And we'll equate that to error. If error not equal to nil, then we'll say c.json http dot status bad request gin.h error is error dot error. Return from here. We'll also handle validation out here. So we'll say validation error validate, which is this we've defined already, validate.struct user. So whatever data you have in your user, you're going to compare that out here and you're going to validate it. That's how you're using the validate function. If validation error is not equal to nil, then you'll say c.json http.status bad request gin.h error is validation error dot error and return. Okay, then you must have seen that I also in the Postman, when we were using Postman in the beginning of the project, we were also returning the count of the users. So let's get the count. You will say user collection dot count documents cdx comma json.m email is user.email, and we'll defer cancel, and here we'll handle the error. So if error not equal to nil, so here we'll say log dot panic error and c.json http dot status internal server error comma gin dot h error, and here we'll say error occurred while checking for the email. So in all the other functions like get all users function, we're going to use this count to show the count, but in this function, in the signup function, we'll use count to actually help us validate. So if you find any documents with this email already, that means the count is more than 0, then we can handle it. And similarly for phone number, we can check the same. All right, so let's also use the same concept for phone number, and here we can say count comma error user collection dot count documents ctx comma json.m phone. Here we'll say user dot phone. Alright, and after that we'll do the same thing, defer cancel, and if error not equal to nil, we'll say log dot panic error c.json http dot status internal server error gin dot h error occurred while checking for the phone number. And now we can handle this. Like I said, if count of any of these is more than 0, then you can say gin.h this email or phone number already exists. Perfect. So do subscribe to this channel, and thank you for following, and thank you for watching this video. Do subscribe. In this video, we're going to take forward our sign up function. So I know this series is taking quite a while because we're following the proper project structure, and we have a lot of files, a lot of validation, a lot of things we are doing. But I'll try to move fast in this particular video, so that we at least try to finish it either in this video or in the next video. Let's not stretch it too much because I want to jump onto other series which are more interesting for you, like React and Golang and all those other series, right? So so let's try and finish it quickly. If you don't understand anything, do let me know in the comments below, but I'm going to try to explain everything and also go quickly at the same time. All right, so now we also had to create these two timestamps. I had shown you in the user model that we have created at and updated at, and then this user ID. So these two timestamps and this string of user ID is still left. All right, so ID is primitive, whereas user ID is going to be string. So just know that. All right, so for user ID, we'll say created at comma blank is equal to time dot parse time dot RFC 3339 time dot now dot format. So if you're from a JavaScript background, you've probably worked with Moment.js or some other time library like that, right? Time and date library. But with Golang, I have not. I've just used this time package, and I've not used any third-party library like Moment.js. If you know of any, do let me know. But I've been using just the regular old clunky little time package that Golang gives you. All right, and for user dot updated at, we're going to have the same thing. So you will say user dot updated at comma blank character time dot parse and the same thing time dot RFC 3339 comma time dot now OS small time dot now dot format time dot RFC 3339, and then you have your user dot ID, this one user.id, and then we'll work on user ID separately, but for now we're working on user.id, and user.id is going to be primitive dot new object ID. Just making sure I have the GitHub the MongoDB packages here. I don't have them here, so I don't have the MongoDB packages here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually include them. So after my decrypt, I'm going to say go.mongodb.org/mongodriver/bison. All right, and I'm going to say go.mongodb.org/mongodriver/bison/primitive, and I'm going to say go.mongodb.org/mongodriver/mongo. Perfect. So here we were here in the sign up function. So we worked on a user ID. Now it's time to work on your user ID, which is in your model. It's this one. All right, the string. This is the string you'll use to actually access this the user. And here you'll say user.id, which is this user.id, and you just want it to be in hex, and you're sorted. Now you want the token. the token that you'll send to the user, right? So here we'll use a function in our helper package called generate all tokens, and it's going to return three things. One of them is token, other is refresh token, and there will be a third thing that we won't need right now, so we'll put blank here. And to generate the tokens you're going to pass star user.email. You're going to pass user dot first name. You need to pass user dot last name. So the user, you already have the user as a model, as a struct, right? So that is what is represented by user, and your user has already received that information, right, from the request that's coming in to the signup function. In the signup function, I'd already shown you in our postman that we'll send all of this information, the email, first name, last name. So that's what we're referring here, and we're going to send it to a function called generate all tokens in the helper package. And we also need two more things. One is the user dot user type and ampersand user dot user underscore ID. This user ID is the same that we just created here. Okay, it's the same thing. So we created it out here, and then we're sending it to the generate all tokens function. And here I'm going to get I'm going to have to set the user.token with the token that I receive here out here, and user.refresh token is something I have to send to the user again, and I'm going to set it with the help of ampersand refresh token. So sorry, it has to be capital T actually. It's this one, right? You're sending this one to it. So our user object has been created properly now. And now you want to insert this. So now that you have tokens and everything, now you want to insert this into the database. To insert that into the database, you'll say user collection dot insert one. Since the user is signing up, along with sign up, you also have to create that user in the database, right? So this is an important step that we have to complete. And here you'll pass the context and you'll pass user. And then we'll return something called as a result, like an insertion number. Okay, so here we'll say result insertion number. If you remember, when I in the first video when I used Postman to actually sign up, we got back an insertion number. If you're not if you don't remember, you can go check out that video again. And here we'll also get an insert error. If there's an error while inserting this record into the database, we'll get an error. So that's the error that we want to handle. So to handle it, we'll say insert error not equal to nil. We'll print out the message. We'll use fmt.printf to format the string. So we'll say user item was not created, and we'll send this string that we have just formatted. So we'll say http dot status internal server error comma gin.h, and here we'll pass the error in the message. From this function we'll return and at the end, if everything goes okay, we'll say http dot status OK, and result insertion number. This is what we'll send back to the user, saying that everything has been inserted properly, thank you. Okay. Now we can either work on the login function and the get users function, or we can work on the generate all tokens function. So I think this makes more sense. It makes more sense for us to work on this, so that there's continuity, and then we can work on login again. And now what we'll do is we'll go to our helpers, and we'll go to our token helper. So we're already done with auth helper. We want to work on token helpers, because this is the file that will have our generate all tokens function. Okay. Now I know that the first 3 videos we didn't really reach the meat of the whole authentication logic, but in this video we're actually tackling the entire logic of creating tokens, of creating the user in the database during sign up, right? So this video is kind of really important, and just give this video more time in your schedule. Just go through it properly, be more attentive, so that you don't miss any important details. If you get the contents of this video right, everything else is just a breeze. So this file is also a part of package helper. So you can have multiple files, you can have all of them in the same package, and then that package, it's very easy to import that package into your other files. So that's how all these folders, all the files in these folders, they all belong to one single package. So these 2 files belong to the helpers package, these 2 files belong to the routes package, and so on. Okay. So here, otherwise we would have to import those files separately. And here you'll say import context. We want fmt to print out stuff, log to print out errors. You already know that by now. And you need OS, you need time. You've already seen why we need time. And I also need database. So I'm going to say Golang JWT project /database, and I need the JWT package. So just like in Node.js or JavaScript, you have to install an npm for JWT. Similarly, somebody has created a Go driver, a Golang driver for JWT for us already, and it's on rijalway/jwt.go. If you're not sure about the spelling, if you're not able to understand it from this video, go and search for JWT's -go, and you'll find this package. All right, and now I just need to get my MongoDB packages, which is mongo driver /bson and go.mongodb.org/mongo driver /bson/primitive code. Now you might be wondering, if this whole part of this thing was the same, I could have just copied it, right, just to save time. I somehow like typing everything out, because I know there are a lot of beginners along with me in this in this video, and they're learning from this. And the first advice that I give to any beginner is to type out every single thing slowly, and understand, build muscle memory, build the basically in your brain. Just give it time to understand the syntax and get used to the syntax. If you're new to coding, if you're somebody who's been coding for a while, you won't have any issues, obviously, but somebody who's new to coding, for them it's very, very important to type everything out, to understand the syntax, to get used to it. At least that's just my perspective. If you if you don't agree, it's completely all right. So we have to create something called as signed details. It's a struct, and this struct is going to have, now your JWT token, right? It uses a hashing mechanism to basically take the details that you give it to give you a token. And if you want, you can go to the jwt.io website and you can decode that token and get all the details back, right? So it's just a way to store information. And the JWT token also consists of a secret key usually, and the secret key is something that's with you, that's secret. I'll be creating the JWT token using secret key, but in my environment variable, I won't be keeping a different variable called secret key. You're free to do that. You can do that. Okay, and you should do that. If you're using your software on production, you have to have a secret key here. That's the secret key that your JWT token will be using as part of the details that it requires to create the token for you. But since I'm just building it to show the demo to you guys, I don't have to do it. So here I'll say email is string and first name is string, then you have last name string, and UID is string again. So let me just format it out so that it just becomes easier for you to understand. Now I think you can understand much clearly. You have user type, sorry, the spelling is wrong. You have user type and you have string JWT dot standard claims. Now we'll initialize our user collection like we've done in all the other files. So we'll say variable user collection, which is of type mongo dot collection is equal to database dot open collection, and here we'll say database dot client, sorry, we'll say database dot client, and you'll send the name of the collection that you want to access. Perfect. And we'll define our secret key. Like I said, in my case, I won't be having the secret key, but you can just go to your environment and create anything for the secret key, you know. So here is equal to os dot get environment secret key. So now comes the most important part, where we have to work on our generate all tokens function, which takes email as string. So to get these details right, you can just access your user controller, and all the things that you passed to your generate all tokens, you can access them right here. All right, so there's email for sure, and then there's first name, last name. I remember this first name, which is string again, and last name, which is also a string. It takes, I know that takes user type, which is again a string, takes UID, which is a string, and then this function returns a couple of things. Okay, so let's talk about those. So one is the signed token. So if you go back to your user controller, you'll see that it's returning a token and a refresh token for starters. So we'll say signed token, which is a string, and it says signed token, sorry, signed refresh token, which is again a string, and sends back an error, which is of type error. Okay, now here we could handle the error here and here, in other places. Basically we can handle the error, but that will just, you know, increase our time to code. So I encourage you to actually handle the error yourself. If you, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're used to the format by now, right? This is how you handle the error. All right, I'm not handling the error, so I've put in a blank character there. All right, so this will return an error, and this function will have some definition. So the first thing that you'll create is your claims. So the claims is going to be of type signed details that you have created here, which is a struct, and it has these details. And here we'll say signed details, where you have email. This email with a small e is what you received inside this function, and this email with the capital E is part of the signed details, which you have to complete now. And then you have first name, which is first name. Then you have last name, which is last name. I'm just using auto fill at this point. And then I'm using UID, which is this UID. Then I'm using user type, which is just user type. And then you have standard claims, JW dot standard claims. And here we're going to set our expiry. So with every token you need to have your expiry, in the sense in how many minutes or days or weeks or whenever it will expire. And here I'm just going to give it 24 hours expiry. All right, so I'll say time dot now dot local. This is, by the way, why you use the time package here. Dot add. Inside this I'll say time dot hour, time dot duration. Inside here you'll say 24 dot Unix. N is small, put a comma here. Out here also put a comma just to be sure. So that was your claims. Now let's work on our refresh claims. So for your refresh claims, obviously it's going to be again of type signed details, and it's going to have all the standard claims. So you'll say standard claims is JWT dot standard claims. So refresh token is basically the token that you get, that you can use to get a new token if your regular token has expired. In case you didn't know that, right? I'm assuming you know a little bit about what authentication is in general, but in case you didn't know, you get a token, and then if your token expires, then you use the refresh token to get a new token issued to you from the backend. That's how it works. So we'll say time dot now dot local dot add duration. You have the same thing. Add time dot hour multiple time dot duration. And here what do you think is a good number? I'll just say 168 or something like that. Yeah, say Unix, put a comma here, and then we'll call the JWT, which is our package JWT. It has a function JWT dot new with claims, and here you pass your JWT dot signing method HS256, which is your algorithm to create the encrypted token for you. And here you'll say dot signed string byte, and here you can pass your secret key to create the secret token for you. Like I said, I'm not using secret key in this video. You can just go ahead and put a secret key out here. Right, and this we'll capture in token in a variable called token, which is going to be our token, which will be returning from here. And your refresh token is going to be quite similar. You'll say refresh token comma error JWT dot new with claims, same function, new with claims. And here the algorithm that we're using is exactly the same algorithm. So we'll say JWT dot signing method hitched says 256 comma refresh claims comma signed string. Here it'll say byte secret key. Okay, let's press enter. Here let's handle the token. If error are equal to nil, so log dot panic error return, and from this function you'll return the token and the refresh token and the error. So this function is complete. It's quite long, I know, but it is quite detailed. I mean, it has all the details that we require. We're returning the token, refresh token, and error. And now I think the sign up function makes much more sense to you. It is a long function, but we have everything going on here. We have validation, we have timestamps, and we have tokens and refresh token, and we're inserting the user into the collection. It's not complicated, it's just long, right? But we're covering everything here. And then we can head over to our login function. I think we can work on the login function, and then we can also work on our get users function. So in the login function, we'll say gin dot handler func, and we'll return a function which takes C, which is of type g dot gin dot context. And here let's set context dot with timeout and context dot background. We're basically doing the same thing that we did out here, right? The same thing we're typing, just to ensure your understanding. Actually, here we can capture in CTX and cancel, so you'll understand it better. And here we'll say comma 100 multiplied by time dot second. All right. And again, just like we did for sign up, we'll define a variable called user. So we'll say variable user models dot user. If you've not understood the sign up function properly, and if you've not understood the get users function, get user by ID function properly, you can leave it on the comments below. If you have any doubts anywhere, I will be happy to help and help you understand. If you've understood those functions, then this function is not very difficult. So we're keeping another variable called found user, because the person who's trying to log in, that person needs to exist in your database. That's why you have a found user variable. And we'll say here c dot bind JSON ampersand user, and we'll use f error equal to, and we'll check for the error here. If error is not equal to nil, I'll say c.json http dot status bad request comma gin.h error, and here you'll say error dot error, and you'll return from here. Then we'll try and find that user. So we'll say user collection dot find one ctx dot bson dot m email. We'll use the user's email. So when he's trying to log in, he'll give us his email and password, and so we'll try to find the user from the user collection using his email. And the found user, we'll store that in found user after decoding it. And here we can also equate this equal to error, defer cancel, and if error that we have caught here is not equal to nil, then you'll say c.json http dot status internal server error, comma gin.h error, and email password is incorrect, and we'll return from here. All right, and then we'll use a function called verify password that we'll create here. So it's verify password, where we pass the user dot password and the found user's password. So the user that is trying to log in has sent his email and password to us. Now using that email, we find that user, and then we store that in found user, and then we use the user's password and the found user's password. We send it to a function called verify password to check if they're both matching, basically. And if so, yeah, so we'll capture that in password is valid variable, and also the message. And here we'll say defer and cancel. Now we can either go ahead or we can work on our verify password function. So I think I'd like to actually work on the verify password function, which I've already defined the outline for here. It's going to be a very simple function. It takes, as you know, user password, which is string. It takes provided password, which is again string. All right, so let's see what we're passing out here. To verify password, we're passing the user's password and the found user's password. So that's what we're passing here. And what do we return from here? We return just a boolean and string, which is the message. Now the boolean is going to be stored in password is valid variable, which is going to be a boolean again. All right, and then this has its own definition. So we'll write the definition for this function, and we'll use the bcrypt library to compare hash and password. So we'll say compare hash and password. We'll equate that to error. So we'll say error equal to compare hash and password. This function takes the provided password. It also takes, obviously it takes the other password, right, the user password, and just compares both of them. So this function takes care of everything for us. We don't have to manually sit and compare using any string methods or anything like that, right? So it'll use its encryption and decryption, whatever it does, all the magic it does, to compare both of the passwords. So let's keep a variable called check is equal to true, and message, we'll keep it empty for now. If error is not equal to nil, that means there is an error, then the message becomes equal to fmt.sprintf email or password is incorrect, and check will become equal to false. And from this function you just return the check and the message. So check is the boolean that you're returning, which is getting caught or captured in your password is valid boolean variable, right? So this is how it's working. All right, and I think we have gone over the 20-minute mark, and I think we've even gone over the 30-minute mark, so I'll have to leave this video for now, and then I'll continue this in the next video. I know I said that I want to try and complete this, but as you can see, it's quite a lengthy project. So I thought, I seriously underestimated. I thought it's going to be just 20 minutes, but it's already been more than, I think, 80 minutes or 90 minutes already. But then we're doing so many things, right? We're like building a bulletproof authentication system. You can just copy this and paste this in all of the projects that you'll use in the future, and you'll be good to go. That's my guarantee. You'll be good to go. So let's get started. I won't waste too much of your time. And now, I realized in my sign up function, I missed out something really important. So I missed out the part where we have to work with the password. All right, so before your user phone thing, right, where you count the documents for the phone, here you'll have to write password is equal to hash password, and here you'll pass user dot password. So we have to create a function called hash password. We already have the outline of this function. So this is one small step that I missed by mistake, and where is it? Yeah, here. Yeah, just remember it's above your phone, user phone count document part. All right, and here you'll say user dot password is equal to ampersand password. Now let's start working on our hash password function, and then we'll resume the login part that's remaining. Okay, so your hash password is not a very complex function. It's a very small function. It just takes password as a string, returns the strings as well. So it takes a string, which is password, it returns a string. We know that because when we are trying to capture what's coming from this variable, it's going to be captured in string, a password, which is which is going to catch a string. And here in string we're going to say bcrypt dot generate from password. And you'll use the password here, comma 14. So it'll generate a hash from the password. So here you'll say if error not equal to nil, log dot panic error, return string bytes. Now it's quite possible that you have no idea how authentication works, right? You have no idea how JWT and the tokens and all that work. So even though this function is really simple, I'll just explain to you why you have to do something like this. Is because in your database you can't store the password of the user as is. You have to hash it, right? So that if somebody has access to your database, they can't just take away all those passwords and start using them, right? So you have to hash the password before you store it in your database. Most of you probably know this. I thought, if there's somebody who's really new to how authentication works, I'll just explain it anyways. So now let's go to our login function. In login, we had reached the part where we were checking, we were verifying the password. Now, whatever we've received here, which is a boolean, as you already know by now, so we'll handle that boolean. So we'll say password is valid. This one is not equal to true. c.json http status internal server error, comma gin.h send out the error, and you return from this function. All right. Now one more thing, one more check we can. Now there are a lot of checks you can add, right? So it's it's almost like adding salt to a dish. If I'm showing you a recipe on how to build or how to cook something, like let's imagine I'm a chef, I'm showing you how to cook something. So the sugar and salt you always add up to your taste, right? So that's how it goes with validations. You can add as much salt as you want, or you can add like almost no salt, whatever you're fine with. So I prefer a little bit of salt, so I add a little bit of validation, but up to you. If you don't want to add any validations, you know, completely fine. I mean, that's completely all right. If you want to add a lot more validations than what I've added, knock yourself out. So if the found user's email is equal to nil, then we'll return another error. We'll say c.json http dot status internal server error, comma gin.h, and the error is going to be error user not found. Okay. Now after the statement, you'll use the helper dot generate all tokens function, and you'll send the found user dot I mean, you'll have to send a lot of information here, so let's start with email. And you by now you already know why we are sending all this information, right? The generate all tokens function, which is in your token helper, generate all tokens. It takes email, first name, last name, user type, UID. It stores all this information to create a token for you. All right, and along with the secret key, which I'm not using in this function. Anyhow, so for your generate all tokens, you'll have founder user dot email and found user dot first name, last name, user type, all of those things, right? So let's start with first name dot last name dot user type and user ID. Found user dot user ID. Okay. And the tokens that come from here, you already know that this function returns a token and a refresh token. It also returns an error which you're not handling, which you can handle, by the way, if you want to. And then I'll use a function called in my helper file. I'll have a function called update all tokens. Here I'll pass token, refresh token, and found user. Sorry, it's just found user, not founder user. It's found user dot user underscore ID. So let's work on this function, but the thing is, login function, there are only 3-4 lines left, so let's just complete that. Hold on to this for a minute. I'll show you this function also. Don't get confused yet. So let me complete this login function, right, so that we have at least closure on at some place. So here you'll have user collection dot find one ctx comma json dot m user ID. Here you'll say found user dot user underscore ID. And after you found that user, you'll use the decode function like you've been using till now, and you'll use found user to structure it, right? This is the struct, and you want it to be structured like that. And here you'll say if error is not equal to nil, that means if error is there, That means you'll have to catch the error somewhere, right? So you'll catch the error in error. So here you'll return c.json http.status internal server error gin.h error dot error. Perfect. And if the error was there, you'll just return from this function. Otherwise, you'll say everything is all right. So you'll say this http.status okay, and you'll return the found user. All right. So after the login is done, you'll basically you're just finding that user, and then you're returning that user's data after login. And you must have seen the first video, right, where when I log in, I receive that whole user object. In that you have the token and refresh token as well. So that's basically what's happening here. So now let's go to update all tokens function. So we'll go to our token helper. So we're done with the generate all tokens. Now let's work on our update all tokens function. Okay. Now there's one more function somewhere that I have to use. It's called the validate token. Let's worry about that later on then. So let's work on the update all tokens function. Here I'll come here, I'll say func update all tokens, and here you're passing the signed token, which is a string, and the signed refresh token, which is again a string. Then you're passing the user ID, which is again a string. So in this function, we'll again work with context. So we'll say context dot with timeout, context dot background, comma 100 time dot second, where cdx comma cancel, and we'll create an update object, which is primitive.d. Now we'll just append our token and refresh token to this update object. All right, so we'll say update object, and you'll see why we're doing that, by the way. So we'll say update object is equal to append update object comma bson.e token comma signed token, and you'll say update object is equal to append update object comma bson.e and refresh token comma signed refresh token. So now you'll update your updated at. So your user has an updated at field. You remember that? So the updated at field is the one that we are going to update right now. So we'll say time.parse time.rfc 3339 comma time.now dot format time.rfc 3339, and you'll say update object. We'll append the updated at, this field updated at also, to this update object. So append update object to it. So we'll say bson.e updated at comma updated at upsert is equal to true. We'll take a variable called upsert, and now let me show you. We'll basically use MongoDB to update our this object here. So let me show you how to do that. So we'll say filter is equal to bson.m user ID with user ID, and opt is equal to options dot update options upsert, and here we'll pass this upsert in our options. We'll just put a comma here just to maintain the syntax. And now comes the main part as to why we have been doing all of this stuff, right? Basically, we want to go to our user collection and we want to update the user. And when we update the user, we want to capture that in a variable which we won't use because we just want to update him, and we don't want to do anything with the updated data that comes back or the error that comes here. So let's just handle the error first, and then we'll write the logic inside this update one function. All right. So after you say defer cancel, you will write if error not equal to nil, log.panic err return, and at the end you'll just return. So now comes the main part of this entire function and why we built all of this stuff, why we created this update object, which has the latest token, the latest refresh token, and it has your updated at field, right? Every time you log in, you'll get a new, you already know that you'll get a new token and refresh token, right? Every time you log in. So you're creating the updated object, and you're also appending updated at to it. And now comes the main part where we'll actually go to the database and update the user collection. So we'll say context basically is used to update that particular user's data. Then we'll use filtering using the user ID. Then we'll use bson.d. And if you've used MongoDB, you know that you have something called as $set. So here we'll set the update object. And then you can also pass the options, which are completely optional, but we're using it here anyways. That's it. So that's all your update all tokens function is doing, that whenever you get new tokens, when you log in the next time, your tokens, refresh tokens, all of that is stored for the user collection. Okay. And now I think we can go back to our user controller and see what all functions are left. So mostly everything is done. Only our get users function is remaining as of now. So let's work on our get users function. It's we'll use gin.handler_func to handle this function, and this will return a func. So if you've seen my other videos, you're seeing a pattern here, right? Earlier we used to use http.handle function, right, to handle all functions that are related to let's say a particular route sending its data to a handler function. And it's the same pattern but that Gin is following, as in Gin is not doing anything different. It's just building a layer on top of your HTTP, all the things that you used to do with your HTTP and your MUX router and all those things. It's just building a layer on top of that. I mean, you could build your own framework like Gin. Maybe I'll show you how to build your own framework like Gin. It's not that difficult, by the way. It's almost, if you've used Redux in React, you probably know what I'm talking about. Redux is not complicated, right? And then there's this middleware called Thunk, So thunk is just about, I think, 8 or 9 lines or something like that. It's very, very simple. But we somehow developers think that, okay, this is a different framework, so I have to use that framework or I have to use that package. Then we start bouncing between all these different things. But you can build your own packages and frameworks. I mean, it's not a big thing. And if you work for a really engineering driven company, so there are companies that are completely engineering driven, right? They have a product and then they have to focus on the product only. So if you work in an engineering driven company, then you will have to probably work on building your own frameworks rather than using external frameworks, right, for security purposes. So I'll show you how to build your own frameworks, not an issue. So I've built a lot of npms that I've not released to the npm.js library. So what I'll do is I'll probably show you how to build those type of npms for your own project and then use it in your own project, right? And not everybody should have access to it, obviously, because then it stops becoming secure. So that's the whole point. Like, nobody has access to that code, so nobody has figured out the vulnerabilities. So that's the npm that you create and use it for yourself. And that's the same thing I used to do when I was a Ruby on Rails developer. I used to create gems, and those gems can be used in your projects, and you can use it in different projects later on. And similarly, you can do with Golang. All right. So I'll plan a video and show you how to do that. So here you'll say gin.context, and you'll say helper.check user type. So in our user helper, this is our auth helper, I think. Yeah. So in our auth helper, we have check user type already. This function, that's the function we are calling. Okay. And here we're just checking if that user is admin. So here we're just passing admin as the user type. So this function, all it does is it takes the role that we pass. It can be just a regular user or an admin, and we're just checking if that guy is the admin, right? Just to make sure that we give him access to the right things. Now the authorization logic here is very simplistic. I'm just checking between two things, the admin or regular user. But to have a completely big authorization layer, that's a whole different project in itself, right? So maybe I'll take that up after we're done with authentication. We'll do the whole authorization layer, where depending on which role you have, you'll get access to particular features. All right. So maybe we can do that later on. So here you'll say c.json http. Now the best part here is that once you build these projects with me, like let's say the authentication and the authorization, then you don't have to build it ever again. I mean, you don't have to always start from scratch, right? That's the beauty with programming, with languages like Golang and Node.js, that once you've built something, you don't have to build it again. And that's how you grow as a developer, right? You have access to so many different types of projects that you've already built, and you know every single line of. That's very important, by the way. Knowing every single line of the code that you've built, that's very important, because it helps you to troubleshoot much better later on, right? Don't just pick up code from the internet. You'll get into a lot of trouble if you're using it on production. Just code along with me and get to know every single line perfectly. That's how you become a really good developer. And so here you have, you're saying it's a bad request, right? That means you're not the admin and you're trying to access something that only the admin has access to. So you have to say bad request. And then we'll say var ctx, cancel is equal to context dot with timeout. Now, I'm sure that you already know this, but I'm just telling you in case somebody has missed it, that get users function can only be accessed by the admin, because you're getting the entire data of all the users, right? It's not like get products or get product categories. That it's not that type of a API, right? It's not that type of a function which all users have access to. All users have access to the products API, like let's say in an e-commerce. But get users is a function that only the admin can call, right? I hope you know that already. So that's why I just want to clarify that this is why we're using the check user type function to actually check if he's the admin or not. And here we'll say context dot. Sometimes when I'm not explaining stuff, when I'm writing the code, it's because I'm assuming that you're already understanding it. It's very straightforward. But I've received requests that sometimes I don't explain stuff, so I'm trying to explain every single line here. But again, if you still missed anything, there's any issue you're having, please reach out. Please let me know, and so that I can make videos even better for you. So we have string convert dot atoi c dot query record per page. How many records do you want per page? Basically, that's all that's happening here. So you'll say record per page and error. You will capture that here. So if error is not equal to nil, and these two lines you use if you want to or, if you want to say or, basically that's why you use these two lines. So if the record per page is less than 1, then you'll set record per page is equal to 10. So by default we are sending 10 records per page anyways, right? Almost like a pagination kind of a thing. And here you'll say string convert dot atoi 3 dot query page. You'll access the query that somebody has sent for the page and for record per page. This is like this is like your standard pagination, and if you've used Node.js, then this is like page and count per page of the records that you want per page. That's what's happening here. If you've not used the string convert.atoi package, do take a look at string convert. This basically helps you access something in using numbers instead of strings. So here you'll say page and comma error 1. And here we'll handle the error. So we'll say error 1 not equal to nil, or page is less than 1, then page equal to 1. So by default you're saying that on the first page you want 10 records, right? If somebody has not sent the page or sent 0 by mistake in the page. That's what you're doing here. Now we'll build the logic to create the pagination. So we'll say start index is equal to, this is like your skip, I think it's called skip and something in Node.js, I don't remember clearly. So you'll say record per page, skip and limit, sorry, it's called skip and limit in Node.js. It's exactly the same thing that we're doing here, nothing fancy. So here we'll say start index comma error is equal to string convert dot atoi start index. Sorry, inside this you had to say c dot query and then start index. And then I'm going to build a proper tutorial on how to use aggregation in MongoDB. That's a very important topic. But here I'm just going to use two pipeline stage functions. One is called match. Sorry, I'm going to use, I'll have to use match, project, and group. I think I'll have to use these three functions here. But there are so many functions in MongoDB, right? Aggregation function, pipeline function. We're just going to use three. You need to know what project, match, and group does. If you don't know, then do take a look at the MongoDB aggregation documentation. But I'll be creating detailed videos on every single pipeline stage function. Don't worry if you don't understand it right now. I'll try to explain it to you right now, but if you want to dig deeper, you can read documentation, or if you want to wait, you can wait for my tutorial on aggregation in MongoDB, where I'll explain every single pipeline stage operator in complete detail with examples. Because I struggled a lot when I was learning it, like 4 or 5 years back. So now that I know it so well, I probably know it better than the guys who created MongoDB. I mean, that's obviously an exaggeration, but I know it really, really well. I mean, I can tell you, and I'll tell you why I know it. It's not. I'm not saying that I'm the smartest guy. I'm not the smartest guy, but I know it because our product, which is remote teams, the other product that I'm the CTO at, it required a lot of charts and graphs, right? So all of those required a lot of aggregation pipelines to be built, and this is why I have really struggled with really advanced pipeline functions, and that's why I'll show you how to work with it. So here we'll say match, comma bson.d. So a match stage, pipeline stage, just matches the, let's say if you want to put some values here, let's say if you want to put some conditions here, it will match all the records in your database with this particular value. So right now we're not putting any value, we're just saying it's empty, but we could, right? So this is your match stage, this is your group stage. You can have a match stage and a group stage. Usually they're used together in a lot of scenarios. You'll say bson.d and $group, comma based on dot D. So all group functions, they start with something called as ID, right? So ID basically helps you tell that on which ID do you want the all the data to be grouped on. So we are saying that group for our group ID, group all the data based on ID in the database, and also help us create a total count. So here you'll say comma total count comma based on dot D $sum comma 1. So $sum is not a pipeline function. It is a separate function. Let me show you. Basically, not sure why my browser is not working properly. But this is not a pipeline stage function. It's a different. It's in a different category. So it's a different type of function, and sum basically helps you calculate the sum of all the records. Basically, that's what $sum does, right? So if you want to find out the count of all the records in the database, so you'll group them with the help of ID, so that all unique IDs will be grouped together, and then you will be able to count them using $sum. That's what this function is doing. Okay, and then we'll use comma data comma based on dot D $push comma $root. So if you don't do this, right, if you don't push, if you don't use the $push and push everything to the root, I don't know why it's not getting selected. Yeah, if you don't do this step, then you're not going to see the data. You're just going to see the count, right? But you want to see the data, so you're saying that all the data that was there before this pipeline stage, which is group, keep this in the root, as in I want access to that data also, but I also want access to the count, right? So I want access to both things. If you skip this step, if you don't write the $push $root, then you won't get access to the data. You'll just get a grouped object which will just have the count data, right, after $sum. So this is I've tried to explain to you as best as I could. I know it might not be enough, and this syntax might be a little challenging for you, right? It's quite possible that you have not used aggregation functions before. But it's a very important topic in MongoDB, and I'll be covering it in a lot of detail. But I've tried to kind of explain to you as best as I could that there's a $group stage. There are multiple stages. One is a match stage where you match. Here we don't have anything to match, so we'll just use directly the $group stage. But we could use something in the match stage, so that's why I've kept it. In the $group stage, you can group all the documents in the database using a particular ID. So here we're using the ID of all the records as the unique field to group all the documents by. And with the help of that, what you can do is you can start finding the counts, all the count of the total unique users there. You can have the total count. But when you calculate the count, you lose the data, as in the $group under thinks that you just need the data, you don't need actually the records, right? So, and that's why you need to $push $root, so that you get actual access to the data, because you want to return that data also to the user at the end when he gets the users, right? That's what's happening here. And then usually with match and group stage, we also have something called as the project stage. So let's keep that as well here. Project stage helps you to define which all data points do you want to go that should go to the user, and which all should not go to the user. So you can completely control it out here. And here, how you're going to control it is, so this basically makes the data a bit more readable, or the benefit here, the big benefit here is that if your front end, let's say, is a mobile app, right? And your mobile app doesn't want to have a lot of data fields coming in. So you can control it here that, okay, these are the data fields that I want should go to the front end. Otherwise, it'll be too heavy for the front end to actually render all this data. And you can control, which can go and which can't go. So almost like, which is basically the problem that GraphQL solves, right? So you can solve the same problem with using the project stage in MongoDB. I mean, that's at least what I think. So you have $project, and here you'll have comma pson.d. Inside that you have _id, comma 0, comma total count, comma 1, comma user items, comma pson.d, $slice, comma interface, $data, and here you'll pass your start index and your record per page, and at the end you can put a comma. So after this bracket, after your project stage bracket, you're going to call your aggregate function. Obviously, that's why we built all our match stage and our group and project stage, because we want to call the Mongo aggregation function. But before we do that, let me see if I have got the right number of brackets at the end of the root. So I have to have at least 6 brackets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I have one extra bracket here. There's 7 brackets, whereas there should have been 6 brackets. So I think that's a problem. But I'm also closing everything properly, so I don't know why the issue. Maybe this group part shouldn't have double brackets, I'm not sure. That's correct, this is correct, ID is correct. pson.id. Sometimes it's helpful to refer the MongoDB documentation. So this has to have 3 closed brackets, and here I'll have to remove 1 bracket. So mostly when people are starting up with MongoDB aggregation, they will get easily confused because of the syntax. So what I suggest usually is you put your syntax on a different line, like this, for example, right? And here now you know that now as soon as I put it on a different line, now you know that, okay, 1, 2 and 3 brackets opened up, 3 brackets closed, right? And after every single comma, put it on a different line. So every little aspect is on a different line altogether. So now it all makes sense, right? The group stage, it had 3 open brackets, so that's why we have 3 closing brackets. And inside the group stage, we have this line with the comma, which basically is referring to the ID based on which we want to group things with. So that has 3 opening brackets, 3 closing brackets. So this is perfect. This has 3 opening brackets, 3 closing brackets, because this is the total count part. And the data part has 3 opening brackets, 3 closing brackets. So everything is in balance now. So now you won't have any errors. So with MongoDB, this can be the only challenge, and this is how you solve the challenge, right? Writing things on a different line. So here you can do the same. You can actually, it is on a different line, so after the comma everything is on a different line. Project. So I think we're good there. Yeah, so back to using our aggregation function. So we'll say user collection dot aggregate, say ctx dot mongo dot pipeline, and inside the pipeline you'll say match stage comma group stage comma project stage, and you'll get a result from this operation, or you'll get an error. So let's say defer cancel, and let's handle the error. If error not equal to nil, then we'll say c.json http dot status internal server error comma gin.h error. Error occurred while listing user items. Okay, so you close that here. You create a variable called all users, which is a slice, because that's what you want to return. And here you'll say if error is equal to result dot all cdx comma ampersand all users, error not equal to nil, log dot fatal error. And if everything went well, we'll say c.json http dot status okay, and you'll send all users indexed at 0. You'll send all the users to the front end or to the postman, whatever. So here I have a spelling mistake. It should have been fatal. So in the user controller file, I think we are complete, as in all the functions are complete in our user controller file. Auth helper, I think almost everything is complete. Token helper is complete. User router. Now this is the function that you need to work on, authenticate, and then we need to have one more function, auth helper, I think, and then we're kind of done with this. And then we have to obviously test it and fix all the errors and everything, so which I can't do in this video because we have again I think gone way over time, and I'm trying to finish this, but it's taking a long while. So I'll need one more video, guys, one more video to finish this. Just 2-3 more functions left, and then testing and obviously fixing all the bugs. There will be a lot of bugs here, so we'll have to fix all of that together. We have about I think just 2 functions to go, and then we're done, I think. And then we'll have to do a lot of testing. So come back to your user router file, and here this authenticate function, it should be in the middleware, right? So let's go to our middleware and let's open our auth middleware.go file. Right now it's empty, and now we have to start writing some code for the authenticate function. All right, so let's say package middleware import fmt net/http, and we need the helper. So for the helper is basically this file, this package, right? So we'll say golang JWT project /helpers, and then obviously we need github.com/Gin Gonic /Gin. And now let's start writing our function. So we'll say func authenticate gin.handler func. This will return a function which takes C and gin dot context. We get our client token C dot request dot header dot get token. This function basically is taking the token from your header. So whenever, let's say, you call any user routes, right? These user routes, the /users and /user by ID, these routes are predicted. These routes are predicted and private routes, you can say. And before these routes are called, you'll have to authenticate it. So that's why we're using a middleware. So for all incoming routes, you're using a middleware first, which ensures that everything is authenticated, all the requests are authenticated. Only then you can call these APIs, right? I thought I'll just explain to you in case it's not clear. And like this, so the auth routes like sign up and login can't be protected routes, because obviously you'll need these to be public, right? So that anybody can access them. But these routes, the user routes, can't be public, because only the people who have the token can access them. So similarly, if you create more routes like order and products and all those routes, all of them will be protected again, right? So coming back to our auth middleware, here we'll check if the client token is empty. Then we'll say c.json http.status internal server error gin.h error, and for the error we'll say fmt.sprintf no authorization header provided. All right. And I think it's safe to also put c.abort here to abort operations and return. And after this bracket, like this is again the part of the return func. So after this bracket, the client token bracket, you start writing helper dot validate token. Now this is the function that we need to work on, right? This is the function that will go in, I think, our token helper, and this will help us validate our token. So here we'll pass the client token that the client has that the user has passed us to check if this token is in fact valid. And here we'll get the claims, comma ARR. So claims are all that information, right, that you get from inside the token. So I think let's work on this function and then proceed further. Otherwise, things might get confusing for you. Okay, so save whatever we have till now, and then let's go to our token helper. And in our token helper, we have the we'll have to create now the validate token file, the function. So here in your token helper, let's start writing our func validate token, and this gets a signed token, right, which is of type string, returns the claims. The claims are of type signed details, right? So all this information is going to be returned from here, like the email, first name, last name, all those things. So that's why we'll say here star signed details, comma MSG and string. Awesome. And here we'll say JWT dot parse with claims. So this is an internal JWT function, and we'll capture this in token and error, and we'll send the signed token and a reference to signed details, and a function which takes in the token returns an interface and an error, and this returns if we have the secret key and null here. So this function is going to process all of this, your secret key, your signed details, and your signed token, all of that, and then it's going to return the token basically. After this, you'll just check for the error. So it'll say if error is not equal to nil, we'll say message is equal to error dot error, and you'll return from here. Now let's say token dot claims dot signed details, and we'll say claims comma okay, and now we'll check if if the token is okay or not. So we'll say if not okay, then the message will be fmt dot sprintf, the token is invalid. So if somebody is trying to send a wrong token to access those routes, we'll say the token is invalid, okay, because the signed details are not the same. And msg is equal to error dot error, we'll send the error also, and then we'll return from here. Now there's one more conditional check that we can do. This is usually a good practice, and you can include it right now, otherwise you can skip it if you want. We also want to check the expiration date of the token. So if it's so now if you're sending an expired token, then we should not allow the user to sign in, right? So let's do that also. So we'll say claims dot expires at. Claims as a word might sound confusing to you at sometimes. Claims is basically all the information that the user has in his token. So here we'll say local dot unix, and msg is equal to fmt dot sprintf, token is expired. msg is equal to error dot error, and return from this function. You already know what we're returning. We're returning the claims and MSG, the message that we have been formatting till now, right, with the errors. So that's what this function does. All right, so now that our validate token function is done, that which validates basically the token is all right or not, let's head back to our auth middleware, and after we have called this function, we'll handle the error. So we'll say if error not equal to empty, that means if there's an error, so we'll have to say c.json http dot status internal server error comma gin.h error is error. Again we'll say c.abort and we'll return from here. Cool. Sorry, by mistake I've written it here inside c.abort. It needs to be after c.abort, and we'll return from here. And what we'll do now is we'll set the email with claims.email. So we're setting a context with all these details, all right? And we'll set the context with first name claims dot first name last name comma claims dot last name UID comma claims dot UID user type, claims dot user underscore type, c dot next. All right. So this completes, I think, all of our code. Now let's go to our terminal. I'll just increase the font size. Let me open up a new window of the terminal and increase the font size. I think now you can see it. So here, I'll go to the location of the project. Roll on JWT project, yeah. I'll have to run go mod tidy because we have included a lot of packages that we didn't install. So we're just running this command that automatically checks our project for all the packages that are not there but we have included, and it gets all of them for us. All right, now is the time to run the project, and then we'll get a lot of errors. So let's get all the errors and then let's go through them one by one. So we'll say go run main.go. As you can see, a lot of errors have started. So right now it's showing only one error, but once we solve it, then we'll see all the other errors. All right, so let's go through them one by one. Let's start solving them. The first error that we got was saying that in our main file, the routes is not in the root, in Go root, right? So now that I realize that the project that I've built right now, the complete project, is not in Go root, right? I've not done that. So it's in a different file. It's in a different folder altogether. So that's why we'll have to, when we initialize our project, the complete path that we gave it, we'll have to give it the complete path. And we'll have to do this everywhere, wherever we're including all the files in our other files, right? So we'll just copy and paste this. Let's go through files one by one, starting from user controller. So here we're getting the helpers. So let's add that. And we're getting the models. And now let's take a look at our database connection. Everything good here. Auth helper, token helper. Yeah, so we're referencing database here, so we'll have to add this as well. So if you're having the same error that I did, if you, in case you're not having this project in your Go root folder, where your Go root is configured, then you'll have to do the exact same things that I'm doing right now. But if in case you're at the right place, then you don't have to worry at all. You won't get this error in the first place. All right. Controllers. Middleware and controller and main.go. So I've included that everywhere. So now what we'll do is we'll try to run main.go again. So that's saying there's a problem with the database connection. This package is also not in the Go root. So it says go/MongoDB blah 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 is not in Go root. Now if you go to this file, right, database connection.go 11, you're here. Now you can see obviously there's a mistake here, that it should have been go dot and not go slash. Now if you run the program again, this error won't be there, but you'll get some new errors. So the new errors are cannot refer to unexported file name mongo.client. All right. So it's on the same, it's in the same file, line 38. So now let's go check it out. As you can see here, the error is very easy to debug. It's basically, it should have been a capital C. So now let's run the program again and see if there are more errors. So yes, now we're on the right track. We have so many more errors. Now let's start finding these. So the first one says that on line 14 of usercontroller.go, you have redeclared a package. So on usercontroller.go, line 14, yes, very accurate. You know, we have already imported helpers, we're importing it again, so that's wrong. All right, so that's taken care of. Now line 72, actually what I'll do is I'll control Z here, because if I remove this line right now, all the other lines, you know, they'll lose their numbers and it'll be very difficult to debug. So I'll just comment it out for now, and then I'll remove it when all the errors are done. So let's go to line 72. It says no new variables here. So line 72, it says no new variables here. Yes, because we've already used count and we're using the walrus operator here. We'll have to remove that, use the regular is equal to, because we've already defined count. So that's also taken care of. Now the thing is, with Node.js, I never do this. So I always, you know, make sure that I'm not making a lot of errors while writing the code. But with Golang, I don't do that. I just write everything. You know, even if it's a huge project, I just write all of the code at once and then I start debugging. The reason for that is that Golang is so accurate with the errors. It's telling you the exact line and where the error could be and the exact error. You don't get that with JavaScript at all. Like it might tell you there's an error there, but it won't tell you why the error is there and what's the error exactly. You know, the error could be something else and you might be getting some other issue. So but here with Golang you get like very specific errors. All right, so I'm very confident in just writing everything in one go and then debugging at the end. Like it doesn't bother me at all. I know if somebody coming from a JavaScript background, it might be like, you know, it might make you nervous that why are you writing so much code and then debugging everything at the end. But then once you start using Golang, you'll get used to this. Trust me. And then then let's go to line number 87. Okay, so now here on line number 87, it's saying unexpected star and comma expecting name or something like that, right? So that means here, there's a problem here somewhere, and yeah, I can see the problem here. Instead of this dot, it should have been a comma. So that's taken care of. On line 146, it's saying there's an error on line 146. So it's saying on line 146 there's some issue. All right, what's the issue? Unexpected new line, expecting a comma or something like that. All right. Yeah, so I can see the issue. The issue is that I should have had if error is equal to or something like that, right? Now hopefully we won't have the error now. Okay, so that's taken care of. And then now 147 we're returning from this, and now because you know, we hadn't written if error is equal to, that's why probably there's an error on 147. So we'll ignore this one for now, all right, because I think it was because of this issue. The error was given error out here as well. Now let's go to 167. So 167, it's saying, so these are all syntax errors now. So it's saying unexpected new line, expecting comma or something like that. So here you can either put a comma here, or you can just bring these brackets up here. But what I will do is I won't put the brackets up here yet. I'll just see where else the issues are. So 174, 177, 189. 174, okay, 177 and 189. So let's start from here instead. 177, 174, and now this. So now hopefully we shouldn't get those errors, and let's try running go. So now you get another set of errors, which is nice. You know, you get these errors one by, so you sort out some errors and then you get some more errors. So that way it's, you know, it doesn't overwhelm you completely. So let's go through the errors one by one. All of them are in the user controller file. We're in the user controller file, and here on line 22 it says undefined database. On line 22 it says undefined database. Okay, so why could it be? That could be because we probably haven't imported database here. So here we'll make it database, and we'll remove the comments so that error is taken care of. On line 27 it says error is not defined. Alright, and that's because we have to say, so we have to get the value that comes here in bytes, and then we have to get an error. Only then we'll have the error defined. And bytes also, I think, will now be defined, which was an error as well. Now line 98 says status OK is not defined. That's because I've written small k here. It should have been capital K. Line 177 says siege.json is not a type. That's because I've used curly braces here. I should have used round brackets. And on line 180 it says all users not defined. Alright, so I have an all users defined here, and here I'm using all users with a small u, whereas here I've defined users with this big capital U. So I will fix that. And on 202 you have status OK. Again, I've made the same mistake. It should have been capital K. Alright, so we have fixed all of these errors now, and all of these errors also, as you know, we have fixed, and we have fixed all the other errors. But now I have a feeling that there are so many more. Alright, now we have to fix an error in our routes file. So auth router line number 8, let's head over there. Auth router line number 8. So here, what is it saying? It's saying unexpected start, expecting comma or something like that. Okay, why would it say that? Auth routes, incoming routes. Okay, incoming routes should have been one word, my bad. Now let's run it again. Okay, some more errors. Undefined port in main.go file. So we'll have to fix this port issue in main.go file. And yeah, so I can see that the issue is we're not using the go.env package, so we'll have to install that, and we'll have to first load the go.env file, right? So this is the same code from your database connection.go file. So just go to database connection.go and copy this part, right, where you load the .env file in the first place, and then you can access your port. While accessing your port, you'll have to use the walrus operator because port has not been defined before that. So now you should not get that error. But then we have another error called log. There's an issue with log on line 14. Log, right? So that means there's no log that we have. We'll have to import log, and we'll have to also import fmt, I guess. I don't think so. Anyhow, so log is enough here. Now let's try running it again. Okay, so now it's running. Everything seems to be working fine. So let's open up our Postman. So back in our Postman, in our sign up, localhost 9000 user /sign up, this route that we just created, I'll just change my email address and put something random here, so that, and I'll just put some random numbers in my phone number, because we have validation on email and phone number, right? When you send this, saying could not get response. So there seems to be some error here. So let's try and fix those errors. So we'll have to take a look at our code, but firstly let's try and understand the error. So it says undefined validation function min on field first name. So let's go to the code. Here in our user model file, validate required min 2 max 2. Now there's one error, one possible issue that could be because of which this issue is happening, is that there are spaces here, right? So if we remove the spaces, then I think the error should go away, because the validator, the external package that we are using, is not able to process the spaces. So the validator package that we're using needs to look at all this data and then determine how to handle this data. So this is what I think is the issue. And now let's stop this, start the server again, and let's try sending the request. As you can see, the request worked perfectly fine and we got the inserted ID. Alright, now let's try logging in. So to log in, we need this email and this password, right? This email and then we need the password. Now there can be more issues with the login route, so that's why we're testing every single route to ensure that we don't have any errors anywhere. So let's try logging in. So it's logging in, it's giving us the token. That means there is no error or issues with the login route, which is amazing, because that's where most of the issues usually stay, the login route. So auth, now we have to change our token here in our /users route, and let's send it. So we're getting the list of all the users, because when I signed up, I was an admin. So just after I've signed up as an admin, I can get the count of the total users, and I can get all of the users. And now we can work on getting just one user by ID. So if I just select this ID here and paste it here, now you must remember that you also need the token. So copy this token and paste it here, send it, so you can get the user by ID as well. So all of our routes are working, the program is working completely fine. We're getting these nice logs as well to debug and to know which all API was hit. You have the method also of the request. So everything is working fine. We've completed the project. Finally it's done, it's complete, and now we can go back to our React to-do and React chat projects. I was just doing this so that because many people had requested that they want to see how authentication works in Golang, because my other projects with React didn't have any authentication. So I thought, why not show this first and then continue the React to-do and React chat projects. But I didn't know that it'll stretch for so long, right? Even after making 30 to 40 minutes videos, it was just not just not getting over. But now it's over finally. You can use this code in any of your other projects. Feel free to do that. Thank you for watching, and do subscribe to this channel so that you can get such awesome content later on. And I'll see you in the next episode.
It's not a game.